Michelle at the Athlete Center. This video is reviewing a kickstand hinge or a kickstand Romanian deadlift with a hip internal rotation. So this is the ability for our pelvis to rotate around our femur as it flexes or as it loads. So this allows for the head of our femur, the top of our leg bone, to move backwards into the socket and eccentrically load, so lengthen and stretch the outside and back of our hip muscles. As we load into them, they eccentrically load and stretch, and then we're contracting them and strengthening them as we come up. So first we need to be able to create a stable foundation. So having our trunk stacked with our rib cage over pelvis and our pelvis under rib cage. The foundation of this movement is a hip hinge. So we need to be quite proficient at the hip hinge before progressing to this movement. So we can do this unloaded, and then I'll show you how to do it with a weight. So we're gonna start feet in line with each other, and then we're gonna move our, in this case, right foot back so my toe is about in line with my heel. And this is gonna allow me to now pivot off this side. As I internally rotate this hip, this one's gonna come forward. So here's our traditional kickstand Romanian deadlift. To add this rotation, as I sit back into my hinge, I'm gonna shift my opposite side of my pelvis forward as I go backwards. So we're having this counter movement. My opposite knee is going to shift forward while my loaded leg knee stays right over top of my sort of midfoot, almost where you would tie your shoelaces. So I'll show that from the side. My toe is about in line with my heel. And as I shift my hips back into the hinge, my opposite side of my pelvis is going to wrap around, allowing for a lengthening through here and a loading into that hip socket. And then to come out of it, we're going to push our hip forward and go into a relative external rotation. Some people find countering it with this arm can be helpful, but that being said, we want this movement to be coming from our hip joint and not necessarily rotating through our torso. So as I go into my hinge, my rotation comes from here and not necessarily from here. So you can almost imagine like you're trying to pinch something in this spot. So if we were doing it with a load, you would aim the load over your midfoot or your arch on that opposite leg. So here I'm going to load this hip by going into a hip hinge flexion, internal rotation, and then maintaining length through my torso, come up here. So we have a rotation and flexion around this loaded hip. I'm trying to push all four corners of my stance leg in, so trying not to roll in and out of that ankle. If you're feeling a lot of tension in the hamstring, you might notice your knee starts to drift backwards. If you are starting to feel a lot of tension in the hamstring and you're trying to reach through your back to get lower, instead reach through your knee to get lower. So this might be my bottom range of my hip. I could get lower from my knee, or I could just stop when I run out of room at the hip and then come back up. So this is a kickstand Romanian deadlift with a hip shift or a hip internal rotation.